Iceland is the safest country on Earth. Police carry no guns. Entire years 2003, 2006, and 2008 passed without a single murder. Then, on a Saturday night in February 2021, a man was executed with 9 bullets outside his own home, and nobody heard a thing. In Reykjavík, lethal violence was historically an anomaly, almost entirely absent from daily life. For generations, the nation maintained a society where patrol officers carried no firearms, relying instead on de-escalation and community trust. The rare homicides that did occur were almost always impulsive domestic disputes. Premeditated, professional executions did not exist here. But on the freezing night of February 13, 2021, that security evaporated. Outside a suburban home in the Reykjavík neighborhood, an assassin waited in the falling snow. 9. Closely grouped shots hit the victim at point-blank range. Muffled by a heavy suppressor and the howling winter wind, the gunfire left no acoustic trace. It was a cold, clinical strike that bypassed every safeguard of this peaceful society, leaving behind a quiet street and a sudden, terrifying new reality. The man lying on the snow-covered driveway of Reykjavík was 33-year-old Armando Beqiri. To his neighbors in this quiet eastern Reykjavík suburb, he was not a transient figure or a nameless stranger. He was a neighbor, a husband, a father, and a well-settled member of their community. Reykjavík is a street of neat, low-traffic homes, the kind of place where residents knew each other by name and left their front doors unlocked. Beqiri had left Albania 7 years earlier, searching for the peace and economic stability that Iceland famously guaranteed. Over nearly a decade, he built the exact life he had envisioned. He established a registered private security firm, complying with local business regulations, and carving out a professional footprint in the capital. He married, obtained Icelandic citizenship, and bought a home in this peaceful middle-class neighborhood. On that freezing Saturday night in February, Beqiri was returning home to a household defined by warmth and future plans. Inside the house, his toddler was asleep, and his wife was pregnant with their second child, preparing to welcome a new life into their safe, quiet world. This was the sanctuary Beqiri had worked to secure, an existence far removed from any past volatility. He had chosen the safest nation on Earth specifically to shield his family, raising his children in a society where crime was low and trust was high. But that quiet sanctuary was permanently violated at his own doorstep. The stark contrast between the domestic peace inside the home and the cold-blooded violence that occurred just inches away remains the emotional center of this tragedy. Beqiri was a father whose young family was waiting for his footsteps in the hallway. The sudden, silent violence did not just end a life, it tore apart a family and upended the security of an entire nation. As Armando Beqiri pulled into his driveway and stepped out of his car, the darkness of the suburban street offered no warning. The attacker did not hesitate, closing the distance in seconds. This was not a chaotic street fight or a random robbery gone wrong. It was a highly coordinated, cold-blooded ambush executed with chilling precision. The assailant moved with deliberate speed, firing repeatedly at close range before vanishing into the freezing night, leaving Beqiri mortally wounded just steps from his front door. In a neighborhood where children played unsupervised and residents rarely locked their doors, this level of clinical planning was entirely unprecedented. The killer knew Beqiri's routine, his home address, and the exact moment he would be vulnerable. It was an assault designed for maximum lethality, carried out with a level of professionalism that suggested a targeted contract rather than a personal dispute. By the time the first emergency responders arrived on Reykjavík, the quiet suburb had become the scene of a sophisticated execution, leaving investigators to grapple with a terrifying question: who possessed the training, the motive, and the cold indifference to carry out a professional hit on the streets of Reykjavík? The weapon used in the attack was a small .22 caliber handgun fitted with a suppressor. To prevent its discovery, the killer threw it into the ocean, where police divers later recovered it from the freezing waters near Reykjavík's coast. The choice of weapon and the use of a silencer pointed immediately toward premeditation. Shortly after the shooting, the investigation expanded rapidly. Reykjavík Metropolitan Police executed searches across 17 different locations, seizing mobile devices, computers, vehicles, and ammunition. They detained 14 people, keeping 9 in custody simultaneously. This scale of operation was entirely unprecedented for local law enforcement, who were used to simple, single-suspect cases. The central breakthrough came when Angelin Sterkai, a 35-year-old Albanian national, confessed to pulling the trigger, though he claimed he acted in self-defense. The Reykjavík District Court subsequently convicted Sterkai, sentencing him to 16 years in prison. Yet, the sheer volume of arrests and the coordination required for the hit suggested Sterkai did not act alone. 4 other individuals were charged with varying levels of involvement. While Sterkai remained the sole convicted shooter, the scale of the police sweep drew international attention. The Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime analyzed the case, raising the possibility of a turf war involving rival Balkan drug networks expanding into Northern Europe. This international connection led local and foreign media to call the murder Iceland's first Mafia execution. However, distinguishing between a sensational media label and a concrete legal finding requires careful examination. In court, prosecutors focused strictly on the criminal actions of the individuals charged, rather than proving the existence of a highly structured syndicate. While the execution-style shooting carried the hallmark signs of professional underworld violence, Icelandic legal records did not formally establish the existence of a mafia branch on the island. Instead, the evidence documented a deadly local clash within a fluid, transnational criminal network, exposing how easily global conflicts can pierce the safety of an isolated nation. Iceland's geographic isolation no longer guarantees immunity from global syndicates. While the nation recorded 0 homicides in 2003, 2006, and 2008, the Organized Crime Index now lists at least 10 active criminal groups operating within its borders. Transnational networks, alongside motorcycle gangs like the Hells Angels and Bandidos, have quietly sought footholds in the local black market, exploiting a high-trust society that lacks routine border checks within the Schengen area. Confronting these groups is a police force with one of the lowest per capita ratios in Europe, averaging just 1 officer for every 1,200 residents. Unarmed and trained for community policing, local authorities face an increasingly complex criminal environment. This exposure extends to the private sector. Beqiri's role as the owner of a registered security firm highlights how organized crime often targets industries linked to nightlife, property protection, and cash flow. In a compact capital of just 135,000 residents, where security was long maintained by social cohesion alone, the Reykjavík execution proved that a small state's open trust is also its most vulnerable point. On Reykjavík, the physical evidence of the crime was eventually cleared away, but the quiet of the street felt permanently altered. Inside the home, a pregnant widow and a toddler faced a sudden, silent void, their sanctuary shattered in a single night. Throughout the neighborhood, residents who had never thought to lock their front doors began turning deadbolts before sleep. This private grief quickly spilled into public spaces, forcing a difficult national conversation. In Parliament, lawmakers questioned whether an unarmed police force could still protect a changing society. The debate exposed a deep fracture in the country's long-standing narrative of absolute safety. If a professional hit could be carried out in a suburban driveway without a single sound, had the quiet promise of Iceland already vanished? Today, Iceland's illusion of safety is gone. Armando Beqiri's execution proved that no border is remote enough to keep the global underworld at bay. As this quiet nation confronts an unfamiliar, violent reality, one chilling question remains: who is truly safe? Share your thoughts in the comments.